the guru of Squad Double Zero, the assassin like no other. Yes, I'm the best at what I do. Is here to bring you a different video. A video was actually asked about a couple weeks ago. I know I've been slow, and if he sees this video, he knows who he is. I'm sorry I've been slow to the video. Had other videos to do, have other things to do. Anyways, and in all honesty, man, this heat and humidity down here, I mean, it's been death, man. It's been death, make a brother time. But regardless, we get to this thing. I was asked on a serious note, and I think this is before a lot of things been going down with the whole Ferguson situation with Michael Brown and whatnot. I believe so, because I believe that's only I'm trying to think. I just kind of added this part in. I believe that's only been going on about a week, maybe a week and a half. That's a whole different topic for another day. Just FYI, just throwing that in there. Now, I was asked because of a status. Yeah, I know it was a couple weeks ago because I wrote the status a few weeks ago. All right. Pretty much, how come there are so many thugs and not intellectual gentlemen, or I'm not going ladies, but just intellectual guys like myself, and another guy, Uber Hikari, was the other dude that was mentioned. Very interesting, very informative, you could say, question. Very, very thoughtful, contemplative question. A question that requires one to understand the intellects of another, as well as being perceptive on what's going on out here. Not everybody be perceptive of what's going on out here. Regardless of views and viewpoints, not everybody's perceptive of what's really going on out here in reality. People point to problems, but they don't understand the causes behind them. And I'm not, again, this is no bragging on myself or Uber or anybody else. But there are different levels of intelligence, different types of intelligences, you know. There's different types of thinkers. There are simple thinkers. There are people who are more mechanical, more logical, more balanced, more abstract thinkers. And there's a whole list. The psychology gets quite interesting, as well as the philosophy behind it. Why are there not more intellectuals, and why are there more thugs? Now, let me break this down into 3 points. I'll begin by answering the question. I'll give the history behind the current situation, the current affairs, and especially amongst blacks. I guess that's what he's mainly hinting at. And then I'll kind of, go from there besides those two, because I may, likely have something else to say. Number one, why are there so many? First and foremost, just based on pure logic alone, there's not going to be that many intellectuals. That's the nature of the beast. You're just not going to have it. Because people are wired differently, number one, from just pure evolutionary standpoint. I'm not on some Darwinism kind of stuff, but just the way humans are created, right? That's number one. Number two, the social constructs happen, okay? Now, you can be an intellectual with even sometimes not even being literate. It gets hard, but there's natural geniuses and whatnot. You can be a skeptic by nature like myself. You can be very perceptive. You can be a thinker. Okay? And thinkers are people who aren't made. You just can't make a thinker. There already has to be some kind of predisposition or something that it was ingrained in them from childhood. Kind of usually both. Let me put it that way. Okay? You gotta want to be critically thinking. You can't just follow the flow. Now, there's nothing wrong with following the flow of life. But what I'm saying is follow just any old everything. Just be accepting of things. You actually use logic and reason. Now, it gets dicey, and again, I'm not going to try to take it too philosophical with that, but it gets dicey. But yeah, number one, there just can't be. Number two, it's not profitable. And again, I'll explain the history, but it's just not profitable generally to be an intellectual. Whether you come from a monetary standpoint, often. Now, some dudes get lucky. Well, actually, no. Because a lot of dudes who make it big in business aren't necessarily intellectuals themselves. Understand that. Just because somebody's educated or intelligent does not make one an intellectual. Okay? especially when it comes to black intellectuals, which is a whole different field, a whole different breed of character, which people don't understand. Okay, I remember making it dealt with my Facebook page, my personal Facebook page. Don't have a group a picture, and I even went back recently and reread it, and it's from comments I think a couple years ago, back in like 2012, maybe 2013, I can't remember. Regardless, the whole thing was I said I specifically said black intellectuals are arguably more or less the greatest thinkers, and I forget, I'd have to go back and read the whole thing. But dudes got start getting butthurt and all up in their feelings. I clearly said black intellectuals are a different kind of breed, arguably the greatest thinkers on the planet. Not all blacks. I said black intellectuals. Okay? Dudes don't want to be specific. They just want to read what they want to read and read into and misinterpret what you say. Okay? It's very hard for us because the way society, civilization, Western civilization set up, it doesn't work like that for intellectuals. Not very profitable monetarily. Okay? Not very profitable socially often. Again, there are some few exceptions and some dudes luck up. But a lot of times, then there's the whole assassination. For example, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X. Just two examples. You understand what I'm saying? And then there's other things with artists and whatnot. So, not only is it by nature going to be more remote, but also socially, it's not acceptable. Because, for example, especially in this culture, okay, where it's been long stated, for several years now, at least a decade I should say, where sea level is what's expected of you and what is profitable. We want a bunch of sea level because we want slaves. We don't, the intellectuals, see, once you start becoming, the thing about education, here's the thing about education, I'm talking about real education, not this BS, not this artificial nonsense that they try to give us, right? When actual education about life, it allows people to think. And when people can think, they become very dangerous. The thinkers are very dangerous to the system because they will not just willingly accept any old thing. You understand? They may tolerate some things, but they will not accept. And when mankind, when humans, men and women, doesn't matter, when humans are not willing to kowtow to the pressure, not willing to just lay down to any old everything that government, that the state throws at you, okay? That the powers that be, then mankind can, I won't say evolve because individuals evolve, but it can flourish, it can progress, it can do better, okay, for lack of a better terminology. Okay, that's a couple things. Anything else? Why they're not intellectuals? Those are the main two reasons, and then there may be tertiary point, sub points that come along the way, depending on individual circumstances. Like economics and there's the whole socio-economic situation. History. Let me take it back. Okay. Let me take it back to gangs. Where gangs started, like I said, Western kind of thing. Gangs started back in Europe, and I won't say necessarily the 1600s, but I know definitely by the 19th century there were quite a few gangs, and gangs were originally orphan boys come together and pretty much became a family. It was a fight for survival in the streets. Okay? Understand that. Okay? Gangs eventually, and the same thing happened over here in the States. Very poor individuals came together and worked as a family. Okay? Something you gotta recognize. Now, with that whole family demeanor and the whole children, sometimes people died off. Individuals, and people say lawless, I won't go into that whole thing about law, but individuals, some grew up. Some grew up, were hardened, some had already been locked up in prison, incarcerated, arrested, all that jazz. Some became professional criminals. And that's where it started deviating along the way. Okay? It went from more of a family to now criminal organizations, more or less syndicates. Eventually, the mafia came over, and I'll get to that later. But yeah, this is how it started. So, starting from young, still the same thing kind of day, but different. Throughout the ages, it morphed into something very, very dark, dangerous, and degrading. In a lot of cases for young people. Okay, youth. The reason why young folks get involved, it's a number of reasons, but you're just not going to get older individuals. You're just not going to, and it's not beneficial unless they've been brought up in the life. Sometimes it's whole families. Again, I can get into that later. Now, going from there, moving on, you got to understand, most times when you look at gangs, whether it been the Irish when they first came over, certain Asian groups later on down the line, from the tribes, and there were already established entities back in the Asian nations, or Oriental Asian nations, I should say. Whether it been China, I know in Japan you had the Yakuza who ride completely different, and Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, all and later on down the line brought their crews over and whatnot, and Latinos, same thing. Pretty much every group, blacks, pretty much every group who's not been in a position of power has had gangs. Now, you do have white gangs, but it got different. It got very different because of situations. A lot of it had to do with prison. Okay? So all these groups had gangs. The Italians, the American, Italian-American mafia started because of bootlegging in a lot of cases like that. There's a brief history. It's more to the game than that, but that's the brief thing. So a lot of underprivileged groups, gangs would form. This ain't thugging yet. It's just gangs. Understand the basis. I had them all. Now, as far as the thugs were more or less just, hoods were a little bit different. Hoods, and they were a little bit different than thugs. Thugs were just, just dudes on the street, beat dudes up. They just, kind of the low life, whatever, right? You'll see it throughout in the older movies or cartoons or whatever, street thugs, But thugging as a lifestyle. Let me say this. The 60s changed everything. The 60s changed everything in so many facets. Okay? And without going into the different movements, whether from the civil rights movement to the hippie movement, to the anti-war movement, I could go. Gay rights movement didn't come or really come to later. It's kind of started, but it didn't come to as far as significance goes to later. But yeah, those three men, pretty much leaders either were incarcerated, arrested, sometimes thrown in for long jail or prison sentences, You had leaders assassinated. Okay, I already mentioned two of them. Also, you had JFK and Robert Bobby Kennedy assassinated at the same time. Bobby Kennedy was assassinated a couple months after Dr. King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So you had leaders full-blown assassinated. Later, you had Huey P. Newton, and eventually you had Tupac Shakur assassinated, and Kurt Cobain. Different situation with Kurt Cobain, but leaders assassinated. Now, with the 60s, with the loss of leadership, with the disillusionment in a lot of areas, with the end of Nam, a lot of things, frustrations overbuilt, a lot of naivete, a lot of people, they wanted to, restore, and a lot of people not really understand the ideologies, for example, of the hippies, of the artists. So people just joined, latched on, but didn't understand the ideology, didn't understand what the main purposes, the philosophies behind what was pushing the movements. Okay, so what happened is when you had a loss of leadership, it was like almost a loss of gods, for lack of a better term, right? So these leaders, without them, again, the Black Panthers came later, and their leadership got eradicated purposefully. All these are purposeful, but that's the most obvious if you know the history. from the feds and the CIA took them out, took them down. Namely CIA, I should say. Feds are a little bit different. You know. But so you had a lot of loss of leadership, and then there's the introduction by the government. It is by the government of heroin, H, hit the streets, and eventually crack cocaine. Even though freebasing, which was ethanol-based cocaine, was already in place in the 70s and 80s. But yeah, these dangerous substances hit the streets. If not used properly, you know, not crack. Crack's a whole different animal, but coke was already. I mean, a lot of these substances were already acid. LSD should never hit the streets. If you understand the history behind acid, behind LSD. So a lot of things were being pushed on, and it was intentional destruction of the family, of community, of leadership. Every facet that you need for productive society, for a productive revolution, okay, and other things that move humanity in a positive direction, and against slavery, enslavement. Because I argue to say most people. No, I will say that most people are still enslaved to this very day, just enslaved in different ways. You know, a lot of wage slavery still exists, full blown, and we just accept it as is. You know, you have, for example, Native Americans stuck on reservations. You know, the list goes on and on. Okay, then of course you got the sex slavery, sex trade, from whether it be forced prostitution and whole things about prostitution, and you can go in it. So in some cases, actual, full blown slavery. Okay, all these jazz going on out here. Thugging specifically, the 70s. I'm bringing all these. You gotta understand, and for people not to understand, I'm not deviating. I'm not trying to go into tangents, but I'm trying to paint the entire picture of why this problem is so prevalent, of why it's so deep-rooted. Okay, thugging started in the 70s. You know, if we're talking specifically blacks became the face. Of course, the whole racist situation, because marijuana. Let me just give one example. Marijuana. The term marijuana is in itself of racist origins. Okay, it's based on this whole. The real term is cannabis, which I try to say. Cannabis was called marijuana because it comes from a lot of parts, Mexico, and that kind of thing. And the Latinos, they're giving it, and blacks got crazy. So it had a whole racist history. The war on drugs, technically, which I'm not even going to get into that whole nonsense. You can't have a war on a substance like you can't have a war on a tactic, which is a war on terrorism, which is why they will never succeed, and they're not meant to succeed. But, again, just throwing these parts in to attach all the lattice work. War on drugs started back in, I believe, about 1911, but it really really hit in the 30s. Even though World War II, they kind of lifted the ban so they can use hemp and that cannabis money and that cannabis product. But, again, understand. It's just one example of the racist, stigmas, the way that the system, the oppressive system, overall goes. And again, this isn't just a black issue. This is an entire group of people, especially people of color. Any people of color, or any foreigners. Because there's a lot of foreign, but again, I could say what pretty much was it John Jay? I'm trying to remember in the Federalist Papers, talking about one people, one nation, one religion kind of thing. That's going way back to 1787, 1788. So, just throwing a few cents up in there. So the thug culture began in the 70s. People, loss of, you had children growing up, whether through unemployment, sometimes divorce began to happen, okay, breakdown of the family, and then eventually breakdown of the community. Black pride, different things were not only not emphasized, it was looked down upon. You had groups like the Black Panthers. Now, while the Black Panthers were not perfect by any means, they were pushing for a positive direction, and yet they were demonized. Okay. Africa, motherland was demonized. I'm not talking about the origins of humanity theory. I'm talking about the motherland as far as the black people. Okay, it was demonized. Let's see. How to be successful as a black person. This is what we were shown. The media. My pops talks about this. My dad often talked about how all the gangster flicks and the pimps, specifically the pimps now, not just the gangsters, specifically the pimps. Then you had, the models who look after the gangsters, not the gangsters, because gangsters came later, but the gangsters, specifically with the mobsters. Okay. And this is with the idols. These are the heroes. The Robin Hoods. Even though not most of them weren't Robin Hoods, but the Robin Hoods to look at. Okay? Is what the media portrayed, because that's the image that they wanted specifically blacks to have. Okay? Specifically black males. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sexist by no means, but women, grown women know this, and they tell me the same thing. A wise woman will say the same thing as a wise man in this one. Men are unnatural leaders. Real women want men to lead. It doesn't, not no oppression, okay, kind of thing. And submission, that gets, submissive nature gets misunderstood. It means you're allowing yourself to follow the lead of another. That's all it means. It doesn't mean you get smashed down upon. It just means you're being able to follow the lead of another. Okay. Doesn't mean you can't call them out when they're being stupid. El stupido. Okay. No idiota. Okay. You can still call out. And for me personally, women is equals. Or human. Just different. Okay. Love different roles. Men are leaders of the community. Just how it should be. It doesn't mean women can't be in positions of leadership. No, leadership, first of all, leadership changes depending on the situation, which people don't understand that simple concept. It's simple, but it's important nonetheless, like most concepts in life. Okay. But nonetheless, men should be leading families, leading the household. When men don't lead, we see the result when men aren't leading. So this is what they wanted to do. They didn't want men to be leaders. It's different, but it's the same tactic. If you know scripture, you know the Bible, the Israelites, the children of Israel, where kill all of the males 2 years and younger. Okay? Kill them all. Because they're too dangerous. We want to subdue these people. Oh, you can have the girls. This is not a problem. It's not just about the whole physical thing. It's how the makeup is. For example, there's a difference between the male and female voice. I don't know how exactly it is. But for example, I have a group of children. Let me say a group of children, or even animals, but mainly a group of children. Okay. When I say animals, it's going to dog, cat, your pets. Group of children. You have the woman there. She may get their attention. You introduce a male voice though, especially with that, hey, kind of. There's something about the male presence of a situation, or let me just put it this way, a group, okay, and females often, they know what I'm talking about, have a good friend. One of the reasons they ride with dudes is for protection reasons for this. Yeah, there's strength in numbers. You add in a male figure, what's the likelihood that a group being attacked? You understand what I'm saying? What's the likelihood of, for example, I go this route, but a woman being raped? Male leadership, male protection, male provision, male guidance. Men love in three ways: protection, provision, and guidance, advice. That's how we love. And that's how we show that we care about someone. That's how we show that we love. That's just how men operate. And there's more to us than that, but those are the basics. And then if people understand those basics, people be good, be really good. But take all that away. Take that protection, take that provision, take that guidance, that leadership. Take all that away. Introduce, when you have men just eradicate each other in wars. Useless wars, I should add. Because wars happen. Useless wars. Oh, have them dying on foreign battlefields as well. This is what all the thugging begins. You don't want intellectual men, because you see what happens in revolution. You see that things are kept in check. There's no system of checks and balances. No. The people are the checks and balances, because we're all people. Okay, they're the checks and balances. What you introduce is a slave population. It's all about control, ladies and gentlemen. Control at the end of the day. This thug culture is about control, and they've done it damn well. Now, where Tupac comes into play, make a long story short, Tupac tried to make, he's like, alright, I accept this as reality, son of a Black Panther. He's like, we use this thug culture, these G's, the gangsters, even the word nigga, and we take it back and empower ourselves, and we push for a change. This is the same era, the early 90s, where a lot, the Bloods and Crips, there was an alliance made for a little bit, to where groups, and I'll have to give a bit of history on the Bloods and Crips and GDs, okay, Gangsters Disciples, a little bit of history, not all of that. But anyways, with Tupac, he was trying to better his people, trying to better himself, trying to better, and thug culture change it into something positive instead of being so negative and destructive, I should say, okay, to specifically the Black community. But also a lot of young whites were listening. They grew up listening to hip hop as well. Latinos as well. Okay. So he was trying to get the youth of the nation to wake up. And hopefully the world as well, but the youth of America at the time, America with the K, get it right, to break free from the bonds of that mental enslavement, which, for example, Bob Marley talked about. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Okay? Now, as far as in the gangs go, and specifically the three I mentioned, Bloods, Crips, GDs, okay, Gangster Disciples, none of them started off on a lot of ways where the paths in which have been taken. They all started off as positive organizations. Situations and circumstances, mainly because, again, loss of leadership. I'm not saying they were all good. Now, I'm not saying they always did good, or they were, everything about them was good. But it was about positive organizations. Okay? Loss of leadership, imprisonment. You lose the leadership. Even if you want to go, without the head, the body can't go anywhere or just dies. You have the whole Hydra complex. You take off the head, like you take out a Don of a mob, the mafia. You have the Hydra where there's 100 heads come out, okay? To where there's multiple underbosses or even capos come and try to fight for positions of power. So you have mob wars, you have civil wars. To the point where now, in this situation, you have Crips against Crips. Those who fly the same flag ain't even safe. Kind of stuff. Stupid stuff out here. Again, Tupac was assassinated. For a few different reasons. But, again, different subject. What I'm trying to say is the thug culture was specifically implanted into this society because of how dangerous the movements were. And the powers that be did not want, and when I say powers that be, I'm talking about the elites. Some who we see their faces, most of which we don't. We don't know. So people talk about the Illuminati. No, get that mess out of here. First of all, those what they're talking about, you may be speaking about in the music industry. And I've been long got to do that video, but that'll come. That'll come. Because there's reasons I've been holding off on that one. But anyways, regardless, and I know New World Order, there's no specific group at this point. If you look at Tribulation, we're not there yet. Okay, there's no specific group or individual that runs the world yet, but there are several powerful groups and individuals who do pull strings, and you can say mainly European, American, European, and white, but it doesn't just. It's not just about white. It's all shades. Trust me. Okay. Trust me. There's puppeteering going on, and I'm not even going to get into the whole situation with Africa and the neo-colonialism. But at the end of the day, though, It's thugging culture. It's partially our own fault because we accepted it, but in a lot of ways it's not, because it was taught. It was, once again, in the education system, or even lack thereof in a lot of cases. There's a lot of brainwashing, indoctrination, and programming. And that's what happened. People became, in long story short, brainwashed, indoctrinated, and programmed. But I wanted to show all the facets of the entire web, to show that just me saying that doesn't solve the issue. It doesn't, because you can't solve the issue at this point unless you buck the system, unless you get rid of the system before it absolutely, in this decaying system, before it absolutely collapses, which is something I'm going for as someone who's a revolutionary, who's an anarchist, okay? Which anarchy is misunderstood, which is no surprise, of course, because you don't want intellectual thought being understood, because you don't want to empower the people if you want to control them. See, the best thing that they've done, on a final note, the best thing that they've done, those in authority have done, is, and those who allow people, to be puppets under them, they've allowed people to become complacent, often apathetic. You get a little bit of wealth. See what they do is they started getting smart. They gave certain individuals a means to get great gains on wealth, mainly money, capital. See, you got that example there. You got that Oprah. You got Jay-Z. Not trying to diss it, but you got Oprah, Jay-Z. You got Michael Jordan. You got LeBron James. Oh, you have figures. So why are you complaining? Oh, there's no racism going on. I don't know what you talk about slavery. Now, I'm not talking about slavery 150 years ago. I'm not talking about that jazz. What impressive system you talking about? And for what? You got plenty of celebrities. What? You got your Bill Gates. You got your Warren Buffett. You got I won't say George Clooney. Sure. Sure. You got your individual. Every community has theirs. Doesn't matter what community you come from. You have your people. You know what I'm saying? So that you can show us, and then the whole collapse of the American dream. The American nightmare now, to where anybody can get theirs if they work hard enough, which is a myth, complete myth. I learned that I knew that since I was a kid, real young. I don't know, 7, 8, 9. I knew that was a myth. That whole dreams. Oh, follow your dreams. Anybody can. No, that's BS. That's BS, because there's criteria, there's prerequisites. There's, life ain't fair. The way the system's rigged. You understand what I'm saying? So they sell us these myths. And I've said this. America, the United States, probably has the largest amount of mythology in human history. If I tried to list all the myths that America sells, I don't think I can do it, because it's just that ingrained in the society. You understand? People would say this has nothing to do with religion. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the myths of the society itself. You understand? Okay. Unexpected one to like, comment, subscribe. I know this video was long enough for a lot of you, but I'm trying to, when I'm dealing with these issues, these real life issues, I'm trying to in a short amount of time, because like I said, I could have a 2-hour discussion on any type of these videos. But what I'm trying to do is giving you the crash course, the 101 into this kind of situation. Now, we can talk at a greater length if you want to in the comment section or such. Okay, if you're on my Facebook, we can talk there. Anytime. I would love to, about these issues, because these issues are reality. Doesn't matter how they try to dress up, it doesn't matter how they try to fake it. It's reality, ladies and gents. And no words, no examples you give just because a few people made it, and see where they really end up at. I brought up Kurt Cobain, who hated the fame because he's an artist. He hated the fame. And people say suicide, even though assassination, most likely. But regardless, that's just how it is. You saw Jim Morrison. I can go Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. You said Brian Jones, Forever 27. For those who would rather the term the 27 Club. Plenty of Hollywood. You've seen what it's done to many of individuals, especially young individuals. Very talented individuals. Wars to where just eradicating the youth of a nation. Dying because for reform battlefields, for power, for greedy, power-hungry old men. From the Korean War on, it's been really a Korean conflict. Vietnam War wasn't a war. From the Korean conflict on, it has not been an official war that the United States of America has fought. Okay? From legality standpoint, from Congress to other standpoints. Because we're not fighting another real side directly. I'll use we as the American side. Not saying individual, but you're intelligent enough to get what I'm saying. And, anytime, any other questions, any other videos you would like me to do. Now, I may not do them, and as you can see, in a short time, depending on how my mind is concentrating on the subject, because a lot of other videos are just easier to do, to be honest with you. But yeah, man, until next time, y'all, peace. Have a beautiful day, beautiful night. Power to the people. And back in Occupy, power to the people have the power.